Greetings once again. Tonight is Simchat Torah, which means the joy of instruction, literally. Simchat is joy, Torah means instruction. Think about this. Do we enjoy instruction, or do we have a tendency to desire rebellion against instruction? Do we naturally obey God, or do we have tendencies to run away from God? The tradition amongst Jews at this time is to take the Torah scroll and to dance with song and dance with the Torah in their hands. My prayer for us tonight is that we'll continue to grow in our love for God's Word. Now, on to God's Word in Ephesians chapter 3. I'll pause right now while someone reads Ephesians 3, verses 1 through 12. Thank you. Now, in this section, God reveals to the Ephesians a mystery. Now, let's remind ourselves of the context just as Paul does in verses 1 and 2. Paul reminds that he was sent to the nations or to the Gentiles. Remember, this is the same word in Hebrew. This needs to be seen in the light of Jonah being sent to a nation. Paul is the next generational leader of the school of Hillel. He is the president of the Sanhedrin to be. He has been sent to the nations and to the Gentiles. Now, God has given Paul's grace, in other words, a gift to give to the Ephesians. Remember, the Ephesians were Artemis worshiping, feminist, hypersexual, pluralistic, and ungodly people. They were pagans. And the Jews were super segregated, anti pagan, hyper religious Jewish people. And Paul says that he has God's grace for the Ephesians. So, in other words, for the Gentiles, it was the grace of the gift of becoming part of the heirs of the kingdom, and for the Jewish people, it meant that they were become heirs to the kingdom. Now, in verse 3, he says that there was also a revelation of a mystery has been given to them. Now, in many commentaries, the mystery is something complicated, but all of chapter 2, and then in verse 3, verses 4, it is very clear. Messiah was for the Gentiles. This is the mystery, that the Messiah died for us and that we have salvation. It was a mystery that this was going to be expanded to the Gentiles also. And the Jews and the Gentiles would be fellow heirs of God's kingdom. For us, this doesn't seem mysterious. But for Gentiles who knew how the Jews felt about them, oh, what a great mystery. So the Gentiles were going to be included. This was not understood at the time when Paul was writing this. Now, again, Paul reminds them that this was his ministry. And in verse 8, he reminds them that he was the least, referring to his having been the persecutor of the faith. Paul explains this also in Galatians chapter 1, verses 11 through 17. We read, for I would have you know, brethren, that the gospel which was preached by me is not according to man. For I neither received it from man, nor was I taught it, but I received it through the revelation of Jesus Christ. But you have heard of my former manner of life in Judaism, how I used to persecute the church of God beyond measure, and I tried to destroy it. And I was advancing in Judaism beyond many of my contemporaries among my countrymen, being more extremely zealous for my ancestral traditions. We understand that Paul considered himself least amongst the apostles for this very reason, because of this persecution. Um, Also, we understand that Paul is the apostle or the minister to the Gentiles, and he is revealing to them this revelation. Now, in verse 9, the administration of the mystery. Now, some may refer to this as quote unquote the church. I won't go into this now, but the historical traditional view of the church as a body outside of Israel is a little foreign to the Jewish mindset. It's doubtful Paul is referring to something new, but rather the concept of the remnant. You can read about this in Isaiah chapter 6, verses 11 through 13, or Isaiah chapter 10, verses 20 through 23. There's not a lot of time to unpack this, but I challenge you to get into the concordance and discuss this discussion of the remnant. This is the reference, I believe, to what is the thing that is hidden in God. Now, verses 10 through 12, be careful not to regard the church or the ecclesia as the object of God's wisdom. This is how the early church fathers read this. But the Greek is clear. The ecclesia is the agency of God's wisdom. It is not the object of his wisdom. The agency of his wisdom, the recipient of this wisdom is the rulers and the authorities. In other words, kings and princes and Caesars and czars and presidents and dictators, etc. These are the objects of this wisdom that God gives. Remember what Jesus said before Pilate, that Pilate would have no authority had it not already been given to him by God. So God is over all authorities on earth and in heaven. He is the authority. He is the King of Kings. So the job or the mission of the ecclesia is to bring God's wisdom even to the authorities of the earth, and to do so with confidence. And that's what we read there in verse 12. To have boldness and confidence, access through faith in Him. So, my fellow members of this ecclesia, I pray all have a good week. I still wish that I was there with you, but I'm grateful to have the job that I have presently, and I have nice students in the evening, and that my load has been fairly light, all things considered. Shalom to all, and have a good evening.